this part of it, they didn't strike the Voting Rights Act down in its entirety, but this part of it that says the Department of Justice has to pre-clear the laws of the state of Texas or the laws of the state of Alabama or South Carolina or any of these states where there was a pattern, historical or contemporaneous discriminations on the basis of race, the Supreme Court struck that down, which many critics argue renders the Voting Rights Act in its entirety ineffectual. Because this was the enforcement mechanism, the DOJ pre-clearance. So now what has to happen is if somebody believes that they've been discriminated against in voting practices on the basis of race or on any other basis they've been discriminated against, they have to file a lawsuit. And the courts have to determine that there was discrimination. So this is a big change. The Shelby County versus Holder is important because, again, it sort of takes the enforcement mechanism out of the Voting Rights Act to a large extent. All right, a few other things here just real quick before we run out of time. In 1968, Congress passed a Civil Rights Act that prohibited discriminatory practices in housing. Bless you. Some critics of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, believe it or not, as important as it was, as progressive as it was, however you might want to look at that, as ambitious as it was, I think that's pretty value neutral, right? As ambitious as the Civil Rights Act was in terms of ending racial discrimination, some critics argued that it was not complete because the four areas, if you remember, did not include housing. Right? What were the four areas? Does anybody remember without looking back at your notes? You have to look back at your notes. Public accommodations, which we just talked about. What else? Public education, voter registration, and employment, right? Nothing there about housing, right? Congress corrects that 4 years later. In 1968, passes the Civil Rights Act that prohibits discriminatory practices in housing, which was a pretty big deal. Have you ever seen the movie or maybe this stage production of Raising the Sun? Have you seen it? Yes, you have. Which was it, movie or which there's the original with Sidney Poitier or the remake with Sean Combs? The remake with Sean Combs. I haven't seen that one. I've seen the original. Although the remake with Sean Combs, I think, got pretty good reviews. The original was a classic, right? Whichever you prefer, the classic from the 1960s or the more recent one with Sean Combs, maybe you can find it on Netflix or something. It's worth watching. But for those of you who have seen it, tell me what's going on in this plot line. It's a family living in Chicago. It's an African American family. It's really, last time I read it was high school. But you've read the... Yeah, read it. Okay. Yeah. Moved to something nicer. Yeah, that's what it was. They moved to a new house. They come into some money, right? Yeah. And it's an insurance supplement. The patriarch of the family dies, and there's an insurance check that comes, and a good chunk of the story is about how the son loses the money and all that kind of stuff. But the part that I'm really interested in us talking about here is that I think it illustrates pretty well the kinds of discriminatory practices that were very, very common, not just in the South during this period of our history, where African Americans would have been prohibited from buying property or even renting property in certain areas of Chicago or other major cities in the United States. They had these restricted covenants and deed restrictions and so on. So this is the story of a family that's trying to buy a house and they're running into these kinds of problems, right? So maybe it's worth your while if you like to watch classic movies or whatever, find the Sidney Poitier version of it. If you like the more recent rendition, the Sean Combs version probably is just as good.